Welcome to the August edition of North St. Paul Notes. I'm your host, Paul Anderson. Coming up in the next half hour, we'll talk with Joe Stahlmann, a North St. Paul resident and a project manager for the restoration of the Minnesota State Capitol. Stay tuned. North St. Paul Notes is straight ahead. Hello and welcome to the August edition of North St. Paul Notes. We hope this show will keep you up to date on the news and events that are of interest to the residents of North St. Paul. Joe Stahlmann is a North St. Paul resident and a project manager for the restoration of the Minnesota State Capitol. Welcome to the program, Joe.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul.
Well, it's good to have you here. I've talked to you a number of times about this program, and now you are a graduate. You grew up in North St. Paul and are a graduate of North High, and from there you went on to St. Cloud, was it?
That's right.
St. Cloud State.
I'm class of 1995 from North St. Paul.
Okay.
And I immediately went to St. Cloud State where I studied history.
Okay.
And in order to pay for school, I was working in construction for Krause Anderson Construction. Okay. And somewhere along that time, I looked over and saw what the architect was doing and decided to change my major to architecture.
Oh, okay.
And the University of Minnesota is the only, at the time, was the only school in the state that was offering an architecture program accredited.
Right.
So I went elsewhere. I went to Texas, University of Texas at San Antonio, and got my architecture degree down there.
Okay. And then you found a job in San Antonio, too.
I did. I found a job for a firm in San Antonio and stayed there for well over a decade doing design. And at some point I figured out that I really wanted to parlay my interests in history and construction and design, and I became what is called an owner's representative. And I've been doing that for almost 10 years now.
Okay. And the company you work for is a company in San Antonio, but you have other offices around the country too.
That's right. My company's called MOCA, M-O-C-A, and we're Management of Construction Activities is where that originated.
That's where the term
Yes, we're just MOCA now.
Okay.
We do have offices in about 10 different cities across the country. We're about 60 people right now, this project, the Capitol project, got our foot in the door here in the Twin Cities, and that's what moved me back, and my family as well.
Okay. And you weren't disappointed to come back?
I was not, no. This is, well, first of all, you don't turn down an opportunity like the state capitol restoration. But to have it in my hometown, in my home state, made it all that more special, and it was an easy sell to my wife and family to move back. And
especially a state capitol with, like our state capitol, which is probably kind of unusual and looking at all the different states.
We are certainly biased, but I've been to a lot of them, and we have one of the best for sure.
Now I mentioned that you were a project manager, and that means that there must be more. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, certainly. There's a lot of people that worked on this project, and there are a lot of project managers. I'm the owner's representative project manager, which means I am managing the project from the owner's perspective. The owner will hire architects and contractors to do the construction and all sorts of design assist that have direct contracts with the owner, and we help manage that process.
I see.
We typically try to get into the projects early so we can help understand what is important to an owner group, and sometimes even define who that owner group is, especially in the situation of a state capitol.
Sure.
There's a lot of stakeholders involved who have an interest in what is happening.
So among the stakeholders are there quite a few, or?
Well, certainly, yes. We both own the building
Sure.
as members, as Minnesota residents, but there's 5 million of us.
Right.
And so it's also important to look at who works inside of the building, so the tenant groups. And it's an interesting group. We have the governor, who has an office in the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
The Attorney General has an office in the Capitol, although she has offices in downtown St. Paul as well.
Sure.
The Senate and the House of Representatives and the Supreme Court and the Historical Society and right down to the press, who actually have offices in the Capitol. Some people don't know that. Lots of different parts and pieces. And so my job is to make sure that all of those groups are informed of the process and heard from, to make sure that that the project is aligning with their wants and needs.
Sure.
And so that happens from the beginning, from the early scope definition of the project, all the way through where we are now in the closeout period and right
Sure.
through warranty.
Yeah, it's amazing. It sounds like a job that is pretty hard to deal with sometimes because of all the stakeholders. So
It has been I always say it's been a very big lesson for me in civics.
Sure.
Those would be the biggest lessons that I've learned on the project. The nuts and bolts of the project is the easy part
Right.
on a project like
Right.
this.
Well, can you give us a little background on this, maybe a little history of the state capitol building? And
Sure, I'd love to.
I think it's the third state capitol, if I'm not mistaken.
It is our third state capitol.
Right.
We actually had a capitol building already when we became a state in 1858, and that one burned down. It was on Wabasha and 8th, I think, somewhere around there.
Yeah, right.
And we immediately rebuilt another state capitol in the same spot. And that happened in the late 1800s when we were really booming as a state. And almost immediately it was determined that we really needed something
Sure.
more grand. And ultimately we built the third capitol, which we know and love today. That construction started in 1896. It took 9 years to build at a cost of $4.5 million.
Sounds like a bargain.
It certainly is a bargain by today's standards. We think it would be about $500 million if we wanted to build something similar to
$500
that
million?
right now.
Wow.
$500 million, $500 million.
Yeah.
And then it opened in 1905. And so that's been our capital for the last 112 years. The architect is Cass Gilbert, and he's one of us. He's a St. Paul kid.
Right.
Raised here in St. Paul, and he went on to do a lot of really great things beyond the Capitol. He did the Woolworth Building in Lower Manhattan.
Right. He
And
moved to East.
He eventually moved
east,
to
I
New
know.
York,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
and had
right.
an office there. In fact, the Cass Gilbert collection resides in New York
Oh, it
City.
does. Okay.
He also did the West Virginia State Capitol, the Arkansas State Capitol. He did the Supreme Court building for the United States.
In Washington, right.
Yes, so his resume is second to none, certainly. But of course, his finest work is our state capitol.
Sure, yeah. And the one you see most often, of course, is the Supreme Court building, especially lately. They've had
We do see that on
controversial
television.
decisions to make,
Yeah.
and they usually show that picture of the building in any news story that they give. So
Sure.
yeah, so it's been quite a history. And I know that you brought some photos along, and some of these will be showing when people see the finished tape of our program. So
Sure.
those will be interesting for people to see too. And you also brought some samples here.
I did.
And that kind of leads me to the next question that I had. You could perhaps give us some of your opinions about what the condition of the Capitol was and whether it really needed this restoration.
Certainly. Well, what I brought with me is an example of the exterior stone. It is a white Georgia marble, quarried from the state of Georgia, and on this side we have a piece that actually came off of the building, so this would have been installed 110 years ago. And you can see how it is weathered, and there's even some patchwork that was done to this particular
Right.
piece.
So this is the face of the building?
This would have been the face of the building, and
Okay.
how rough that is and chalky, they call
Yeah.
that sugaring.
Okay.
So this stone was meant to be in Georgia, in
Yeah.
the southern part of the United
Right,
States, but
right.
it had, as things turned out, it had been up here and had seen 110 summers and winters in Minnesota,
Right.
which is hard on any surface.
It's almost like it eroded.
It certainly did.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we went around the exterior of the building and numbered every single stone and then gave it a grade and decided if that would be cleaned or buffed or polished or partially replaced or completely replaced. And in order to do so, we opened up a quarry very, very close to the original quarry. And we have new Georgia marble, and you can see the difference, how smooth
Yeah.
this piece is.
Yeah.
And so the new pieces that are on the building now look very much like the one that you're touching there.
So that was originally, it probably looked like this then.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah, it
And-
was polished.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so today we have a mix and match of old stone and new stone right next to each other. And because it came from the same spot, that will expand and contract at the same rates, and
see.
they
Okay.
will work in harmony together. Now that's the exterior of the building.
Right.
That was the easy part to determine why we needed to fix the Capitol, because stones were quite literally falling off of the building.
Yes.
Inside, the guts of the building were also very old and outdated and had long surpassed its life expectancy.
Right.
And, I mean, the electricity and the plumbing and the air conditioning and all those things. So all of those things were replaced in its entirety.
It must have been interesting in a way to see all of that interior work, all of the plumbing and electrical, and see how things were done back in those days.
It was. And so we did get into walls that had never been into.
Yeah.
You know, there's been plenty of construction projects over the last century,
Yeah.
but this one was the first comprehensive restoration of the building, and it was long overdue.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I know it was kind of controversial at the time when it was started, and some people said, well, why do they need to do that? And I even saw a letter to the editor of the paper saying that they should just tear the building down and build a new one.
No, that hurts to hear.
It really,
was
really sad, I thought.
It is quite literally one of the best pieces of architecture in the country,
Right.
and it would be a horrible mistake to
For
tear
sure.
it down.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the project is almost completed now.
It is.
Or would you say it is completed?
Well, we hit our substantial completion in January, which is a term that means a lot to those of us in the construction world. We got to use the building as it was intended and move everybody back in. We had a successful legislative session from an architecture standpoint,
Right.
and those people that were removed out of the building all got to come back in. We have been living in the building now for ever since January, but there were little pieces, parts and pieces that we intended to complete over the course of this year, 2017, and we have a grand opening scheduled for next month, or this month, August.
Okay, that's going to be, yeah, in August.
August 11th, 12th, and 13th.
That's right.
That weekend, there's going to be quite a celebration, lots of activities, music and food, and fun for all ages, and
Right.
almost every single event will be free to the public, and we're trying to get people to come down and really experience the Capitol, maybe for the first time or the second time in many cases. I think a lot of times when I ask people if they've ever been to the Capitol, they say yes, once with my elementary school class.
Yeah, right.
And
I don't know.
never since. So this is a great excuse
Sure.
and reason to invite the public back and really celebrate the wonderful building that we
Yeah.
have.
And the interior improvements included new elevators, was it? Or
We did. We added one elevator and one stairwell from the top floor all the way to the basement. It's the first stairwell and only stairwell in the building that actually connects all of those floors
I see.
continuously. We also extended other stairs in the interest of life safety that only connected the third and second floor. We've now extended those all the way down to the ground floor so people can egress from the building. And we also put in sprinkler heads throughout the building
okay,
that were not there before.
Right.
And so life safety was a big issue in trying to get that up to today's standards.
Another thing I wanted to mention was the sculpture on the front of the building overhead as people enter the front doors of the Capitol, the quadriga it's called.
Sure.
And is there more to that title or to the name of it?
The Golden Horses,
The
yes.
Golden Horses, that's commonly what they're called. I
Of
guess.
course, everybody wants to know about the Golden Horses.
Yeah, and we've got a picture showing you standing in front of the Golden Horses before they hoisted it back up after restoring. They did restore that too.
They
that was
did,
part of it.
inside and out. Originally, we removed them so we could do some waterproofing underneath, you know, on the roof itself.
Sure.
We discovered that the horses and the chariot and the charioteer all needed some structural help inside. So we stripped them down to the original structure within and recreated that, and then re-gilded, of course, with gold leaf. And so they were down for, you know, a few months. And it was a big milestone the day that they arrived back on site. I think we tried to do it on a Saturday morning, and then it was too windy, so we bumped it another week. And those of us who worked closely on the project all made sure we cleared our Saturdays for a while until the weather was just right to hoist them up and place them back.
I remember asking you about this before when I saw the photos of it being hoisted up. Why the crane was in back of the Capitol and the sculpture had to go into the front, and I thought, that's strange. Why would they do that? Well,
yes.
You can explain that maybe.
Well, we already had the crane in the back for roofing work that was being done.
Okay.
We added a jib to the end of the crane and made it longer. And then what that ultimately meant was it was a blind pick and a blind drop, meaning the crane operator didn't have a direct line of sight of where the quadriga was being placed, and it was all done via communication on walkie-talkies and those kinds of things. So there was a certain element that was interesting to those of us on the ground watching the process, but they did a very good job of what they do.
And I can't help but mention that there was at least one local contractor, North St. Paul contractor, who worked on that project, and maybe you can mention who that was.
Yeah, Burwald Roofing did all the roof work for us.
Okay.
And they're just finishing up there now. I think actually at this point that all the roof is complete, and so we've you know, the building had scaffolding on it for many, many years in one place or another.
I know.
And that was kind of one of the sore spots. Why are we just keep putting Band-Aids on this building?
Right.
And let's do it right, you know, full. And so we did, and now there's, you know, no more scaffolding on the building.
Right.
It's
and
good.
won't be for a while.
And won't be for a while. That's right.
Yeah. Well, you feel that it's quite a change and quite an improvement over what we had before.
It is quite a restoration improvement. I'm also often asked what we did different to the stone and the exterior that would keep it from corroding like it did, and the answer is nothing. We did exactly what they did 110 years ago, which means 110 years from now, there will probably be another restoration project to the exterior of the building.
Sure.
And it will weather, but that's intended.
We may not see that, of course.
I don't think so.
Well, now that the Capitol is completed, what's next for you?
Well, our company, we were originally hired because of the work that MOCA did and the people that we work with on the Utah State Capitol, as well as the Idaho State Capitol. And since the Minnesota State Capitol, we have been hired by the state of Wyoming to work on their capitol, of which I worked a little bit on, up until I won a recent project here locally with Fort Snelling.
Oh, sure.
So Fort Snelling is doing a revitalization project, which is intended to recreate a new visitor center, demolish the old visitor center and create a new visitors experience utilizing some of the existing historic buildings that they have on site.
That's the building that is underground, mostly underground.
The existing visitor center is mostly underground,
Yeah.
yes, and it was built in 1980. It does have some water issues, as most buildings that reside underground
Right.
do. And so we want to bring that up into some of the other unique structures that are existing on the fort that we think we can preserve for future generations and utilize to tell the complete story for Fort Snelling.
I see. So, but that is not fully funded at this point, is that correct?
No, as we sit, the legislature gave us $4 million for design, and the ask is for another 30-some million dollars to go along with private funds that the Historical Society has.
Okay.
We hope for a bonding bill next year. We are optimistic that those things will fall into place, but we certainly have contingency plans, and we are always thinking about what ifs on projects like these.
Sure. Okay. That, and you being out, you've been out to Fort Snelling a number of times, I'm sure, and
I have within the last few months,
right.
of course.
And you can see the need for some change.
Yes, yes. It is it's a really special place. You know, it's right at the meeting of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers,
Right.
and it's a very important place to the Dakota Indian people. And so we're doing our best to make sure that all groups and all stakeholders in that area and that sense of place are at the table and have a say-so in what we are about to do from a project standpoint.
Right. Yeah. That fort situation has changed so much since the Historical Society started working on it. And before, you couldn't really tell it was a fort previously.
No.
The roundhouse was there, and there was a triangular building on the corner where those are still there, but they've been included in the within the walls now. So
yeah, Highway 5 kind of cuts right through the area.
I remember that it ran right through. In fact, you can still see on the St. Paul side of the river, you can still see the bridge supports that were previously were Highway 5.
Yes, the previous Highway 5 ran right through the diamond, as we call it, at Fort Snelling. And then they moved it a little bit to the, I guess that's the west, and and buried it below ground, or almost tunneled through the cliff there, in a sense. So today, so many of us drive right through it, and maybe not even aware of what's just above us and around us.
There's an old photo showing the round tower, and the streetcar ran right next to it.
Oh yes.
Into the fort site. I don't know where it ran from there, but it looked kind of strange to see that.
Yeah, there's certainly there's a lot of different periods of important history that's happened there, and defining which one of those periods, and maybe all of them, are important enough to acknowledge during this project is one of the challenges.
I know that some of the one of the plans I heard about was that they were going to include the use of some of the buildings that are the old buildings that were on the site earlier. And they would be restored then and made into part of the visitor center, I believe. Yeah.
That's right. On the west side of Highway 5, there are a couple of buildings that are yellow brick with a red roof. Those were old barracks buildings, and they've been empty for quite some time. And it's going to take a lot of work to get them up to snuff, but we think it's worth preserving, and so we're certainly taking a look at that. Nothing has really been determined yet in terms of scope. We're still very much in the initial planning stages, but it's a really exciting time, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Sure. Well, since you came back to North St. Paul, I know you've become involved in many different activities and groups, and I know for one thing that you are serving on the Design Review Commission for the city.
I am.
And you are, of course, involved with the North St. Paul Historical Society, given your history interest.
I am.
And you've done a couple of programs for us at the Historical Society. And then I understand that you were recently elected the president of the North St. Paul Maplewood Oakdale Rotary.
Yes.
So did I say those in the right order?
You did.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was that order or...
Yep, the Rotary Club of North St. Paul, Maplewood, and Oakdale.
Okay. And I imagine you had to campaign very hard to get that position.
You'd be surprised. I am very proud of the work that our Rotary Club does. And that was one of the first things I did when I moved back into town was start knocking on doors, both at City Hall and in the school district. And eventually I landed on the Rotary Club's front steps. And we do a lot of work in the community. We improve lives locally and globally, and for them to elect me as their president is quite a big deal. And so I'm excited for this next year, and I invite anybody in the area to come visit our club on Friday mornings. We meet 7 a.m. at the Keller Golf Club.
Oh, that's where you meet now.
Yes,
okay.
So we have a wonderful breakfast. We have great presentations, and it's a great way to start the weekend, and a great way to get involved in the community and help others.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate that kind of participation. I think that I wish we could have more people involved the way you have become involved.
I do too.
It's been fun talking to you, but we are almost out of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we finish?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me. As you know, I look up to you as a mentor, and I appreciate you having me here.
That.
Of course, of course. You have been very welcoming at the commissions that we serve on together, and at the Historical Society. So, thank you for everything you continue to do, and thank you for having me here today.
We're out of time on this month's show. We've been talking to Joe Stahlmann, who was a project manager at the State Capitol Restoration. Join us again next month when we'll bring you more news about North St. Paul. I'm Paul Anderson, speaking for everyone at the City of North St. Paul. Thank you for watching.